Starting off this countdown, we have the Green Children of Woolpit. Back in the 13th century, something occurred that took the residents in the small village of Woolpit, England by surprise. Two weird children randomly appeared in the village, clearly out of place. The two were brother and sister and had weird greenish colored skin. To make things weirder, they spoke in a language no one had heard of, and they were dressed in weird clothing. Eventually, they were taken in, but sadly the boy became sick and passed away. The girl, on the other hand, started to like normal food and started to lose the green color in her skin. After learning to speak English, she said that her and her brother were from a place where people had green skin and the sun didn't shine bright. According to her, they were herding their dad's cattle when all of a sudden they heard a loud noise, and then bam, they were in a new place. The girl ended up growing up and marrying a man and starting a whole new life there. But it seems like the two traveled there from another dimension. Maybe in a parallel universe there are humans with green skin. Who knows? Coming in at number 4, we have the Death. Just recently, Reddit user Tomato Ketchup shared the scary experience that they had with a parallel universe. So she starts off by explaining that her father passed away years ago, but according to a number of people, they had seen and spoke to her father and didn't know he had died. The first time it happened was with an old colleague of her father's. He ran into her mom and he said, "Oh, I met your husband just a few weeks ago." The mom explained that that was impossible since he was dead. They brushed it off thinking that maybe he was just confused. But then it happened again. This time it was with someone that the mom used to tutor. He ran into the mom and told her how he saw the father about a month ago and they chatted for a long time. So could it be that in one universe the father is alive and that people who encountered him are somehow universe hopping without even knowing it? And apparently this is common. Another Reddit user posted a very similar experience as well. Their cousin was only 30 when he passed away from heart disease. The day after his death, a bunch of people at the grocery store were saying how they saw him there, and how he was so friendly and chatting to all the cashiers. The Reddit user explained how that was impossible, but apparently a number of people admit that they saw him there, so they weren't making this up. A few months later, another person claims to have seen and interacted with him. So in one reality, the cousin and the father hadn't passed away yet. Maybe they're not sick at all in that universe. And somehow, those two different universes, the one where they're alive and the one where they're dead, intersected. It's crazy.
In at number 3, we have the Green Children of Woolpit. One of the first stories of possible parallel universes comes from the story of the Green Children of Woolpit. It is a mysterious legend of two children with unusual skin colour who suddenly appeared in the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, England, sometime in the 12th century. The children were brother and sister and looked like normal humans beside their green coloured skin. They also spoke in an unknown language, wore unfamiliar clothing, and would only eat raw beans. After appearing out of nowhere, they were starting to live in this new life, and they began to eat other foods and lost their green colour, but soon after getting baptised, the boy became sickly and passed away. The girl continued adjusting to her new life and eventually learned how to speak English. She began to explain to the people of Woolpit that her and her brother came from St. Martin's Land, a subterranean world inhabited by green people. The girl explained that it was a place where the sun never shone, the light was like twilight, and everything there was the colour green. The children were unable to recall how they had gotten to Woolpit. They had been herding their father's cattle when they heard a loud noise and suddenly found themselves by the Woolpit where they were found. It is believed that this story could be a folktale describing an imaginary encounter with the inhabitants of another world, perhaps subterranean or extraterrestrial, or is indeed a real event. The story of the mysterious green children had been mentioned in many writings throughout history and even to this day, many believing they could be the first account of parallel universes or different dimensions. In at number 2, we have Lorena Garcia Gordo. A Spanish woman named Lorena Garcia Gordo posted a comment in an online forum asking for help, claiming to have woken up in a parallel universe. The morning of July 16, 2008, Lorena woke up in the morning and her bed sheets were a different colour. She was confused but got up and got ready for her office job that she was employed for the past 20 years. Thankfully, her car was parked in the same spot, so she continued her morning routine and drove to work. But then the mysteries continued when she arrived at her job. Inside the office building, she had seen some strange people she had never met before, and she walked towards her office. There was a different name tag on her office door that wasn't her name. She thought maybe she had gotten off on the wrong floor, but soon realized she was on the right one and connected her laptop to the company Wi-Fi. And her device was still on the company's router, but she was under a different manager in a totally different different department. Confused, she had to check her personal information and went through her ID, driver's license, and credit cards, but everything appeared normal. Lorena believed that these inconsistencies could be a result of a medical issue, so she took a sick day to investigate what was really going on with her. She went to the doctors immediately, but everything came back normal. She went home and double-checked bank statements and bills, but everything seemed to be the same as the night before, including the top news stories, yet her life was just slightly different. Things got weirder when she had tried calling her new boyfriend Augustin. She had separated from her boyfriend of 7 years recently and had been dating Augustin for the past 4 months. When Lorena called up her boyfriend, someone else answered and told her that no one by that name living in that home or that matched her descriptions of Augustin. It was as if Augustin had never existed, and Lorena soon learned she had never left her ex-boyfriend and they had been together since 7 years ago. There was no sign of them ever having separated. Lorena began to have several mental breakdowns and she visited a psychiatric clinic, but tests concluded she was of healthy body and mind. The doctors told her that maybe she was under a lot of stress, resulting in possibly hallucinating all of this. Days, weeks, and months passed with no answers, and these small inconsistencies continued. Lorena was convinced that she had simply went to bed one night and awoke in a parallel universe, a world in which her life had been altered by small decisions of her past. And finally, at number 1, we have the man from Torrid. The story starts off normal as any, at an airport in Tokyo in 1954. At the Haneda airport, it was business as usual when a European plane dropped off its passengers in Tokyo. As the crowd began to walk off the plane and make their way to customs, there was a neatly dressed, middle-aged, Caucasian man who walked up to officials telling them it was just another normal business trip for him. He spoke primarily French but was able to speak Japanese and other languages. He also possessed different European currencies in his wallet, clearly showing that he was a frequent flyer. When the officials asked for his country of origin, that's when it went from normal to strange. He casually stated that he was from Torrid, said to be on the border between France and Spain. The officials were confused and mentioned to the man that Torrid doesn't exist, and the man showed them his passport and it was issued by the non-existent country of Torrid, which also showed visa stamps corroborating his previous business travels to Japan and other countries. The officials called the company this man was said to be having a meeting with. They'd never heard of him or his company ever before. The hotel he had reserved a room at had no reservation for such a person, and the bank listed on his checkbook didn't seem to exist. Custom officials brought out a world map and pointed to the tiny country of Andorra. Maybe that was his real country of origin, and somehow he was either mistaken or playing a joke on the people. The man became irritated and said that Andorra didn't exist, but it was right where Torrid should be, and stated his country has existed for thousands of years. The officials were all very confused, so the man was detained by customs and given a room at a nearby hotel for the night, while officials tried to figure out what was going on. The mystery deepened the following morning when the man had completely vanished from his hotel room, which had been guarded by immigration officials all night long. Not only that, but all of his personal documents, including his passport and driver's license, issued by the mysterious country, vanished from the airport security room. It was as if the entire thing never even happened. This story is still a mystery with no definitive answers and no documentations verifying the story has ever surfaced. So, stories like this make people believe there could be a time traveler, an alien, or someone from a parallel universe.
Number 5 on this list is Torrid. A pretty clear indicator that someone is from an alternate dimension or parallel universe is if they claim to be from somewhere that doesn't exist. That's pretty much what happened a few years ago with a man in Japan. BuzzFeed says, allegedly this man told customs he was in Japan for business and had legitimate visa stamps, currency from multiple European countries, checks from an unknown bank, and a driver's license issued in Torrid. He was sent to a hotel while things were sorted out, while 2 immigration officers stood outside of his hotel door. But when they went to check on him in the morning, he'd vanished. This was from 15 stories up above a busy street, so escaping through a window was very unlikely, if not impossible. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department searched but never located the man from Torrid. So many questions arise from a story like this. Where is Torrid? What did he need to do in Japan? Where did he go while he was being watched in the hotel, and how did he get out of there? Now that this guy disappeared, no one is gonna know the answer. I think the thing that I don't understand is if this guy wanted to keep his country secret, like he wanted to make sure that no one found out about it, then why did he show up to the airport with documents from that country? Like if he was traveling from another universe, he has to know that wouldn't have worked. And one has to imagine that he didn't want us to know his true identity, because then he disappeared without telling anyone anything the next day. It all just seems super fishy and doesn't really add up. Unless he just screwed up super bad and picked up the wrong papers in the morning when he was traveling dimensions and coming to Japan. Oh, and okay, also another question. If he can move through dimensions and come into our universe and stuff, like, why couldn't he have just warped into Japan? Like, why did he need to use the airport? You'd think that air travel would be pretty archaic and unnecessary for a guy who just moved from, one universe to another one. Comment down below if you can think of any logical reasons as to why all of these things may have been the way that they were. I'm curious to hear what you guys can come up with. Number 4 on this list is the Green Kids. So this one could be an argument for a parallel universe or for aliens. I'll let you guys be the judge. BuzzFeed says, back in the 12th century, 2 children, a brother and sister, allegedly popped up in the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, England. Both had greenish colored skin, spoke an unknown language, wore bizarre clothing, and initially refused to eat any food other than raw beans. They were taken in, cared for, and eventually they adapted, developing a taste for food and losing the green hue in their skin. Shortly after, the boy became sick and died, but after learning to speak English, the girl explained that she and her brother were from a place where the sun didn't shine bright and it was perpetually twilight. She and her brother were there herding their dad's cattle when they heard some loud noise and were suddenly in a new place where they were eventually discovered in Woolpit. The girl grew up and integrated herself into her new surroundings, though it remained unknown how she and her brother got there. The girl went on to get married and live her life here in a dimension that might not have actually been her place of origin. So, what are we thinking here, guys? Alien or alternate universe? I mean, when I hear green skin and unknown language, I automatically think alien, but I mean, I guess that could all be another dimension as well. That might also explain why they would have been okay with just staying here too. Anyways, comment down below what team you guys are on, Team Alien or Team Alternate Universe.
In at number 3, we have time travel. Time travel is talked about by many conspiracy theorists, movies, TV shows, and many believe this is in fact exists, and if it does, then it proves that parallel universes may be true. It's the concept of movement between certain points in time, the movement between different points in space by an object or a person, typically with the use of a device known as a time machine. Time travel is widely recognized concept in philosophy and fiction, particularly science fiction. The idea of a time machine was popularized by H.G. Wells' 1895 novel, The Time Machine. One popular theory is that we could or possibly have moved through space and time via wormholes. A wormhole was first theorized in 1916 and is a tunnel-like connection which has 2 openings and is connected by a throat, and provides a path that a traveler could follow to a distant point. Wormholes can be made by joining the centers of black holes and white holes. This creates a tunnel through space and time. Many studied the possibilities, things like wormholes, black holes, or portals could be direct links or doorways to another universe or dimension. Another mystery relating to time travel is the story of John Titor. John started posting stories on the internet claiming to be from the future and predicting many things, but suddenly disappeared and was never heard from again. For months he responded to many people answering questions on forums, and described future events and often stated to everyone that alternate realities do in fact exist. John also provided a number of technical specs regarding how time travel worked, with overly complex algorithms and grainy photos of his actual machine, which made time travel possible. On March 24, 2001, he signed off forever and was never heard from again. Many are skeptical of John's stories, while others do in fact believe him, and thinks this proves what time travel does exist, and further proves that parallel universes also exist. In at 2, we have space. Besides the ocean, space and the vast universe is the biggest mysteries we don't know about. The constant mystery and massive universe beyond our planet is proof in itself that there are in fact parallel universes. Since NASA's inception in 1958, they have been able to land astronauts on the moon, parked a robot-controlled rover on Mars, and discovered thousands of exoplanets, yet so much is still unknown. The size of the universe is unknown, and it might be infinite in extent. According to the Big Bang Theory, the very early universe was an extremely hot and dense state about 13.8 billion years ago, which rapidly expanded. Despite the harsh environment, several life forms have been found that can withstand extreme space conditions for extended periods. Species of lichen carried on the Ecebiopan facility survived exposure for 10 days in 2007. 7. For humans in particular, space can be extremely dangerous, hence astronauts have to wear spacesuits outside of Earth's atmosphere. Conditions are hostile to the human body, and exposure to weightlessness has been shown to have massive effects on human health over time, but this doesn't mean other life forms couldn't survive, or that other planets or parallel universes exist beyond Earth. It's very hard for scientists and astronauts to research the universe and space, because it's unforgiving and doesn't allow us to rely on the same technology that we use here on Earth. Elon Musk is a large part of the exploration of space with this SpaceX technology, possibly giving us more answers of what lies beyond our planet, and more proof of parallel dimensions. It's so hard to have the exact answers about the universe or what the possibilities are. And finally, in at number 1 we have deja vu. All of us have experienced deja vu, at least one time in their lives, if not often, and many believe that deja vu is in direct correlation to parallel universes. Deja vu is derived from the French meaning already seen. It's the feeling of having already experienced the present situation. It seems to spark our memory of a place we have already been, a person we have already seen, or an act we have already done. Deja vu is associated with temporal lobe epilepsy. This experience is a neurological anomaly related to epileptic electrical discharge in the brain, creating a strong sensation that an event or an experience currently being experienced has already been experienced in the past. Migraines with aura are also associated with deja vu. Early researchers tried to establish a link between deja vu and mental disorders like anxiety, dissociative identity disorder, and schizophrenia, but failed to find correlations of any diagnostic value. A 2008 study found that deja vu experiences are unlikely to be pathological dissociative experiences. Certain drugs have proven to increase the chance of experiencing deja vu in the user. Some pharmaceutical drugs, when taken together, have also been implicated in the cause of deja vu. A case had been reported of a healthy male who started experiencing intense and recurrent sensation of deja vu upon taking 2 drugs together to relieve flu symptoms. Research has associated deja vu experiences with good memory functions. Recognition memory enables people to realize the event or activity that they are experiencing has happened before. When people experience deja vu, they may have their recognition memory triggered by certain situations which they have never encountered. Dreams are also believed to be associated with deja vu, and they're related in 3 different aspects. Firstly, some experiences duplicate the situations in dreams instead of waking condition. Secondly, people may experience deja vu because some elements in their remembered dreams were shown. Thirdly, people may experience deja vu during a dream state, which links deja vu with dream frequency. Many scientists and theorists believe that deja vu could be a window into a parallel universe. In at number 5 we have Carol Chase McElhaney. This story is about Carol Chase McElhaney and starts as she drove through San Bernardino, California, heading to Perris, California for a dog show. She topped a hill south of the city and saw a road sign for nearby Riverside. Carol's family's roots were put down in Riverside in the early 1800s, and she wanted to visit familiar places like her old house and the cemetery where her grandparents are buried. She drove through Riverside and onto Perris, where she checked into a hotel to attend a dog show for the weekend. The next day, Carol went to the dog show and then drove to Riverside to check things out from her past, but nothing was familiar. Her old street wasn't the same. She couldn't find her childhood home. Confused, she went on to go and see if she could find her grandmother's old house, but when she drove into the neighborhood, she was amazed. Everything was different. None of the houses were anything like she remembered, and her grandma's house and aunt and uncle's house next door was simply gone. Carol made her way to the cemetery, but just like the houses, there was no sign of a cemetery or one ever being there. She drove around the block. The area was just fenced off with weeds inside. No gate, driveway, nothing. Carol drove away very confused and tried to find something familiar. She recognized the college and middle school, and it seemed right, but the things were marked differently. University Avenue was a main drag, and there were scary looking people around, and the area she grew up in before had restaurants, banks, and motels, but is now graffitied up and deserted. She had a very strange feeling, so she got out of there. Carol believed if she had gotten out of the car, something weird would happen, or if she talked to anyone around the area, that she would be stuck in this weird version of the other Riverside, or that these people weren't going to be human. After a few confusing hours, Carol returned to her hotel, and everything seemed to be as normal as before she left. A few years later, Carol's father passed away and was buried at the same cemetery where her grandparents were, and the once emptied, fenced-off, weeded lot was back to normal, and the city looked like it did when she lived there in the 70s. No one knows what happened to Carol that day, not even her, but she believes she slid into another dimension that day, one that was not a friendly place. In at number 4 we have Girls in the Desert. This story is about 4 girls that were going home after a Utah rodeo in May 1972. The mystery is still unsolved, and the girls' names have been changed to protect their identities, but it's believed that 2 of them were sisters. The third girl was a first cousin, and the fourth girl was a cousin of one of the sisters. They were driving down Utah Highway 56 in the dark of night when they approached the Medina Railroad crossing, and the headlights of their car lit up in a sharp fork in the road ahead. The rodeo that was located 180 miles from their university dorms in Pioche, Nevada, and they didn't want to be past curfew and be locked out of their dorm room, so they were willing to take a shortcut to be able to get home faster. The mysterious road curved sharply away from the main road toward the direction of the Gadianton Canyon in the distance. Legend claimed that beyond the canyon was a doorway to another world, an evil dimension of horror that the early Utah settlers avoided at all costs. Despite the rumors, the girls chose to take the shortcut, but after driving a while, the road suddenly ended at a towering rock wall. They became boxed in and had no choice to turn around and go back the way they'd come. They were trying to get back on the main road as they began to notice the landscape had drastically changed, and they had noticed a bright light off the roadway ahead. They had no idea where they were and didn't believe it to be Utah nor Nevada, and they desperately needed to find the highway again. They approached the light and they discovered it came from a sort of restaurant or roadhouse with a weird neon sign that seemed to be in another language. Once in the parking lot, they noticed very tall people started flooding out of the roadhouse towards the car, appearing angry at the girls' arrival. They were flailing their arms and screaming at the girls. The girls were frightened because they realized those things they saw were not human, and punched the gas to get away from the events happening at the roadhouse. They started to drive down the road and noticed something was following them. 4 freakish egg-shaped vehicles with one large headlight were racing behind the car until they suddenly disappeared. The girls looked back and the entire road disappeared, and the car veered off the road and the engine died. The 4 girls were forced to sleep in the car, and in the morning they walked to Highway 56 and reported their incident to the police. The police investigated but were left with more questions than answers. The so-called roadhouse had never existed, and there were no tire tracks in the dirt, which was next to impossible. The story had baffled police and made many believe the 4 girls were taken to a different world. In at number 3 we have Mandela Effect. Many people throughout the world have heard of the Mandela Effect or have experienced certain Mandela effects directly. The theory started by none other than Nelson Mandela, but the story that many remember have happened, and this story started this whole theory. The term Mandela Effect was first coined in 2009 by Fiona Broome, when she created a website detailing her observation of the phenomenon. Broome was at a conference talking to other people about how she remembered the tragedy of former South African President Nelson Mandela's death in South African prison in the 1980s. And to interject, for the longest time, this Mandela Effect happened to me. I thought Mandela had died in the 80s in prison as well. However, this never happened. Nelson passed away in 2013. Broome began talking to many other people who experienced the exact same memories, remembering news coverages on his death as well as a speech by his widow. People all around the world have had the same memories of this story, and over the years there have been an insane amount of different Mandela effects, where so many different people have the exact same memory, but these things have never been true. Some of the most popular Mandela effects are that of the Berenstain Bears, the movie Shazam starring Sinbad, the Monopoly Man's monocle, Curious George and his tail, the Fruit of the Loom label, and many others that are highly debated. Everything from popular movie quotes, cereal brands, song lyrics, popular cartoons are talked about by millions around the world, and many of these are remembered differently than they actually are. But how? It's like Star Wars. Luke, I'm your father. It wasn't even the f***ing quote. Love that. The Mandela effect is when a person believes that their memories are accurate recollections, but many believe in this theory because thousands if not millions of people have the same memories. So does this mean we are all wrong, or are there different dimensions, alternate realities, or parallel universes where these memories are coming from? In at number 2 we have simulation theory. One theory that has become very popular lately is that we are living in a simulation, and this is thought to be true by many throughout the world. Many researchers, scientists, and even Elon Musk believe we aren't truly living in the reality we think we are, and our world could very well be a computer simulation. The idea of the simulation theory can be attributed to the prominent Oxford University philosopher Nick Bostrom in his paper called Are You Living in a Computer Simulation?, where he argues that one of the 3 assumptions could be true. The human species is very likely to go extinct before reaching a post-human stage. Any post-human civilization is extremely unlikely to run a significant number of simulations of their evolutionary history, and we are almost certainly living in a computer simulation. His paper argues that we cannot, without a doubt, know if any of these theories are 100% true. However, Nick believes the third option is the most probable outcome, and so do many others. MIT developer and Plow Labs executive director Rezwan Virk expanded on Nick's idea in the books The Simulation Hypothesis, describing what he calls the simulation point, meaning the moment at which we could realistically build a Matrix-like simulation. Rezwan describes his interpretation of the simulation theory, stating that the basic idea is that everything we see around us, including Earth and the universe, is part of a very sophisticated, massive multiplayer online role-playing game, and we are all players in the game. The popular movie franchise The Matrix, which came out in 1999, made many starts to think about if this could be possible and made the simulation theory idea popular. What does this mean, you know? I like it, but it's like, who's controlling me? I wish whoever controlled me didn't make me fall on ice, you know? Many people also think we are in a simulation because of our burst technology and how fast moving it's become over the last few years. It wasn't that long ago where there was no internet, phones, AirPods, electric cars, social media, and over the past couple decades technology has boomed to an extreme level, which many question, how is it all possible in such a short amount of time? And finally, in at number 1 we have the pyramids. One of the most debated are how the pyramids were built, who built them, and how they were built. Many people have questioned how a society back in 2000 BC were capable of creating and building such complex structures. The most famous and biggest tourist attraction are the pyramids in Giza on the outskirts of Cairo in Egypt. Several of the Giza pyramids are among the largest structures ever built, and the Great Pyramid of Giza in particular is the largest and oldest pyramid and is the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still in existence. The shape of Egyptian pyramids is believed to represent the primordial mound from which the Egyptians believed the earth was created. The shape is also thought to be representative of the descending rays of the sun, and most pyramids were faced with polished, highly reflective white limestone in order to give them a brilliant appearance when viewed from a distance. Many of the pyramids are believed to be built as tombs for the country's pharaohs and their consorts during the Old and Middle Kingdom periods. The tombs of the pharaohs and the temple they're held in guarantees life after death according to theorists, and the pyramids itself symbolizes the wealth and power of pharaohs. For years it's believed that the Egyptians used a sled which carried a stone block and was attached with ropes to wooden posts, and that's how they built the pyramids, but this has become highly speculated due to the complexity and magnitude of these structures. So many people have theorized how the Egyptians were able to pull off the building some of the largest and most complex structures in history, and the mystery has yet to be solved. It's one of the biggest questions to date and could be an indication of the proof of parallel universes. Coming in at number 5 we have technology. The amount of technology we have access to and are able to use now is incredible, but 20 years ago these things seemed impossible, and this could be proof that parallel universes exist. Many believe we have been able to make all this new technology possible because of other dimensions. The evolution of technology over just the last 10 years is massive, and many wonder how all of this is possible. Technology is evolving so fast because of a phenomenon known as accelerating change. Each improvement of technology can create the next, stronger generations of technology at a faster rate. As each generation of technology is better than the last, it builds new technology faster. Even just back to the 1990s, the internet was just invented. It was a new commodity to all, but not everyone had access to it, and those who did had to deal with slow connection and dial-ups. Now in 2022 we have Teslas, wireless everything, iPhones, an app for literally anything, 5G, robots, cryptocurrency, drones, and so much more. We have so much available to us now, and the amount of technology we have created and have access to is mind-blowing. Only about 80 years ago was when the first electronic color TV system came out. How is it possible for this massive influx of technology in such a short amount of time? It wasn't that long ago that American inventor and businessman Thomas Edison invented the electric light bulb and phonograph. Looking back at things like that seems like thousands and thousands of years ago to how far we have come now. Edison is considered one of America's leading innovators, and today many would consider Elon Musk the new age Thomas Edison or Nikola Tesla. Many believe that the amount of technology we have access to and in such a short amount of time that there could quite possibly be the technology made to prove that parallel universes exist. In at number 4 we have dreams. Everyone has dreams. Some are pleasant while others can be nightmares. Some of the most common dreams are about falling, being chased, being able to fly, being naked in public, and our teeth falling out. For thousands of years both scientists and people have been trying to decode our dreams and the meanings behind them. Many scientists say that some of our dreams may be glimpses into parallel universes. There are many people who actually study people's dreams, and it's the work of one neurology. It's when they analyze brain waves during dreaming and and study the findings and what they may mean. Ancient Greeks and Romans believed that dreams provided messages from the gods. The Chinese believed that dreams were a message from their dead ancestors, and many Native Americans believe that dreams are nothing but glimpses of a different world that none of us have ever visited. Thousands of years ago, mythics believed that dreams are what happen in a parallel universe, a place resided by ghosts and spirits. Some scientists have debunked the ghost theory, but many agree that they might be in a multiverse, the existence of many more universes other than our own. Many scientists theorize that there could be a copy of all of us in a parallel world, someone who was like you in many aspects. The life of this other you are identical to you in this universe, but may do certain things differently. But since your timelines are different, the worlds never coincide, neither physically nor mentally. Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis and neurologist, says that the interpretation of dreams is the royal road to a knowledge of the unconscious activities of the mind. He and many others believe that because dreams are such an unconscious activity, they give an almost direct insight into the workings of the unconscious mind and could be proof of parallel universes.
In our third spot, we have the parallel universe being. So 5 years ago, this individual thinks that they met someone from another universe, or that they somehow traveled to another universe. Let me explain. One day she was at the beach with her dog when she saw this strange man walking across the street. The man really stood out to her because he was donning the biggest smile on his face and he was walking like a cartoon character. His arms were swinging side to side in very exaggerated movements. A couple months later, she was with her mom and sister when they saw the exact same man again. Her sister actually noticed him first and commented on how weird he was walking. Almost immediately, their mom piped up and was like, "Don't make fun of the man." Now, here's where it gets strange. A couple weeks later, the girl was out for a late night run when she encountered this man for a third time. This time, however, something was off about him. He wasn't happy and swinging his arms like before. This time, he had a huge cartoonish frown on his face and was walking all slumped over and sad. The girl ran home and told her mom and sister what she had saw, but they had no clue what she was talking about. She talked about the time that all three of them had seen the man and how the mom then told them to leave the man alone. But the mom and sister both did not remember that encounter at all, almost like it never happened. So basically, the girl was in one universe where this man was happy and weirdly outgoing, and then managed to switch into another universe where the man was the complete opposite. In the second universe, the encounter with her mom, and the sister never happened, which is why they had no clue what she was talking about. Isn't that freaky? In our second spot, we have the friend from another universe. This is a pretty freaky story that was posted on Reddit by user conclusionwinter4554. She shared the time that she met her friend from a parallel universe. So this story takes place back in the day when this woman was in 8th grade. The day started off normal, she was at school in math class. But when the class was over, her friend approached her and asked why the math teacher had come back. The friend said that the math teacher had switched to another school and that they had a male math teacher. The OP had no clue what her friend was saying because the math teacher had never switched. This was just the start of a weird day. The next thing that happened is that during lunch, her friend started eating meat. He had been a vegetarian for years, but for some reason, he was eating meat all of a sudden, and he even denied ever being a vegetarian. Now, stuff like that just kept happening throughout the day. Now, here's the freaky part. The next day, the friend arrives at school and apologizes to the teacher for being absent the day before. Everyone was confused because, hello, he was at school the day before. But the guy even had a note from his parents excusing his absence. That part freaked everyone out. They thought it was some prank. But now it's believed that the parallel universe version of the friend somehow ended up in their current universe, and that's who they saw at school. Weird. And in our number one spot today, we have Lorena Garcia. Lorena Garcia lived a pretty mundane life until one day everything changed before her eyes. She thought she was going crazy. So on that day, she woke up and noticed that her bed sheets were different than normal. She didn't remember purchasing this bedding, let alone changing the sheets the night before. She kind of just ignored it and went on with her day. But as she made her way to work, she noticed little things were off. Again, she just ignored this as she arrived at work. But when she got to her department, she realized that it wasn't her department. She thought she was on the wrong floor, but she wasn't. She had worked at that job on that floor for the last 20 years. But today, she worked in a different department. She even looked herself up on her works database and it said she worked with the same company but in a different department. That just threw her for a loop. Then things continued to get weird. Her former boyfriend disappeared without a trace. There were no signs of him anywhere. There was not even a sign that the two had even been together. In fact, she hired someone to see what happened to him and his son, and turns out he never existed. At least, not in this universe. Her current boyfriend was someone completely different. It was the guy that she was dating previously, but they had broken up and she moved on. But now suddenly, they were back together again. So somehow when Lorena went to bed, she managed to travel to another universe. Isn't that crazy? Like, imagine waking up and having a completely new job and partner. I would be freaked out.
Number 5. The universe where a death ray was unleashed on the English countryside. Our first disturbing universe was formed in March 2002 when a truck transporting medical equipment in North England made a series of disastrous mistakes. The truck was carrying a 2.5-ton piece of highly radioactive equipment that the workers had forgotten to plug one end of before putting it in the vehicle. As a result, the equipment was projecting a narrow radioactive beam that was measured to be between 100 and 1,000 times above the safe level. Fortunately for our universe, the workers chose to put the equipment in the truck vertically, causing the beam to shoot 1,000 feet directly into the sky, thus preventing harm to anyone other than perhaps a few birds. But the multiverse theory supports the idea that there is a universe where the workers chose to place the leaky equipment into the truck horizontally before setting out on their drive. In this universe, the truck would be projecting a 1,000-foot beam of lethal radiation that would affect anyone whose vehicle or home they passed on their journey to dispose of the equipment. In our universe, the company responsible was prosecuted and fined £151,000, with prosecutors saying that the only thing that had prevented anyone from being seriously contaminated had been pure good fortune. But in the multiverse, this good fortune was nowhere to be found when it was most needed. Number 4. Death from above. Our next entry on our list of awful parallel universes takes us to the Kamido area of Japan in the summer of 1993. The area was home to the headquarters of a religious cult called the Aum Shinrikyo, who believed that doomsday was fast approaching and that their leader could transfer spiritual powers to his followers and absolve them of their sins. It was founded in 1987, but it was not long before some of its members turned to violence. On the day in question, residents of the area began complaining of a strange smell in the air. By the next day, several of the locals began feeling ill and suffered from nausea and vomiting. The day after that, the cause of the sickness was discovered, and authorities discovered that the cult was using a device on the roof of their headquarters to spray a mist in the air that was leaving an oily black substance on the nearby buildings. The authorities were eventually able to convince the cultists to turn off the machine and pack up their operation, and the situation seemed to be resolved. 2 years later, the cultists used sarin gas to attack a subway station, and the authorities decided to study the oily black residue that had been left in the bizarre 1993 incident. Upon analysis, they discovered that the cloud that had been released over the city by the cultists' device was aerosolized anthrax. Fortunately for the inhabitants of the city in our universe, the cultists grabbed the wrong type of anthrax and instead used a strain that had been developed for vaccinations. So instead of doing any long-term harm to the city's residents, they only suffered from nausea and were actually immunized against the disease. But if every decision creates a branch reality, then there is a universe where this cult did not make this mistake, and were able to pump thousands of gallons of lethal gas into a cloud over one of the most densely populated areas on Earth, resulting in one of the most lethal attacks in history. Even worse than this, the failure of the anthrax to work in our universe led the cultists to use a different, less dangerous gas in their future attacks. In a universe where this method was successful, they likely would have continued using the far more lethal substance in their subsequent attacks.
Number 3 on this list is the dog driver. Alright guys, so this one is definitely a silly entry on the list for sure. Ever wondered what it would be like to live in a world where instead of people running it, it was actually dogs? Well, I guarantee you have. I mean, Hollywood basically makes a movie a year based on this premise alone. Well, it's all fine and dandy until we get down to the nitty-gritty of how that would actually look, and then it starts to get a little scary. This next photo is gonna show a dog literally driving a car. Let's pull that up. So obviously this was just a weird photo taken at the worst possible time where the dog happened to get his face there, but it looks really weird. Anyways, first thing about this, the person who's actually driving that car probably needs to rethink their driving habits. I love dogs just as much as the next guy, but you have to think that having your good boy in the front seat like that probably isn't the safest. Second, I am all for the premise of dogs running the world, like, that'd be pretty funny, but it's the human hands that get me. Like, we just get this weird dog-human split, which just makes me want to barf. Who knows though, maybe there is a literal parallel universe out there somewhere where this is exactly what it's like. I mean, if the multiverse is infinite, then there probably would be one out there where dogs and humans are just one creature. Number 2 in this list is the glitch in the garden. That is actually what BuzzFeed is calling this next picture, and I think it's a pretty fitting name. In this next image, you are gonna think that you're seeing double. 2 old guys dressed exactly the same and looking like the exact same person. Now listen, folks, I understand, when you reach a certain age, your sense of fashion sort of goes out the window and you stop caring. You end up with a few different outfits and that's just gonna be that. But this is a bit extreme, I'd say. Am I meant to believe that 2 men who look exactly the same, who stand the same, who have the same cane, and are also dressed totally identically, happen to be in the same garden at the same time? All of that is really hard to believe. And it's really hard to believe because it didn't actually happen. Apparently the person who took this picture only took the picture of one person, her grandfather. There was only one man there when she took the photo, but 2 people showed up when she looked at it back. Maybe this is evidence of a parallel universe. One where the old man, her grandfather, is also at the garden that same day and is just slightly ahead or behind of her actual grandfather. Same sort of idea with the movie that we looked at, but even more extreme because it isn't through a mirror and it's with a whole human being. Just a time lapse where she caught her other grandfather in a slightly different position and it bled into our world. Comment down below if you've ever experienced anything like this before in your own personal life. And finally, number 1 on this list is the iceless planet. This is an image of a parallel universe that is sadly coming to pass sooner than we would hope. If parallel universes are truly real, then there would be a universe out there that has gone through what I'm about to show you and is living in it right now. We have the power to stop this universe from reaching us, but we may need to listen to our pal Greta a little bit more. Here is North America. If all of the ice in the world melted, this universe is slowly becoming more of a reality for us every day that passes by. This is why this photo is probably the scariest on this list, because it's a universe that we're actually slowly creating for ourselves right now. As we can see in the photo, Montreal, San Fran, Miami, New York, Honolulu, these are just some of the big cities that are now completely underwater due to all of the ice melting. This will cause a chain reaction of horror that I don't think any of us can even begin to comprehend. Like, not only are tons of massive cities going to be totally underwater, but the effects this would have on the ecosystem and the economy, they'd be horrible. We just need to change a little bit quicker and stop this parallel universe from ever actually occurring.
In at 5 we have aliens. Some of the biggest signs of parallel universes is the proof that we aren't the only life in this universe and that aliens are among us and live outside of our own planet. NASA, as we all know, are one of the lead investigators of space, and they do in fact have proof of extraterrestrial life, but a lot of the time they hide their findings from the public. In 1976 there were tests performed on Martian soil samples taken from Mars, and the results there were radioactive carbon-labeled nutrients, suggesting that something in the soil was metabolizing the nutrients and producing radioactive gas. One of the original scientists on the case said there was evidence found of organic molecules, which is a key indicator of life. Before this finding, there was a US radio astronomer by the name of Frank Drake, who in 1961 developed an equation to help estimate the number of planets hosting intelligent life and those who are capable of communicating with us. By the end of his research, Frank concluded that the final number of communicating civilizations in the galaxy to be about 10,000. Not only do NASA researchers and other scientists have findings of aliens, but one of the most top secret places in the world is Area 51, and many believe they have proof of alien life. There's spacecraft and even aliens themselves inside of the highly secure building. Area 51 is so-called highly classified Air Force facility and is protected by the government. In 1992, a declassified CIA report came to light and the government mentioned the proof of UFOs and their research on it. The only proof we could get from the government would be from ex-employees of Area 51 because the government facility is covered by the Freedom of Information Act. So any evidence they do have, we may never know. Some things the government doesn't have control of is the sightings and alien abduction stories made by people all over the world for centuries. Since the 1940s, there have been so many different people who have seen aliens and UFOs, and they have all similar descriptions, usually an extremely fast-moving saucer-shaped object with bright lights, things that are not of this world and have not been claimed by an airplane company or military aircraft. The proof of extraterrestrial life and spacecrafts proves that there is so much more beyond our planet that we don't know about, and the technology they have access to is so beyond ours that it's very possible that parallel universes do in fact exist. In at number 4, we have past lives. Some of the biggest debates is that of humans living previous lives and the proof of reincarnation. If this is true, it makes the parallel universe theory very strong. Many people throughout the world have claimed to remember their past lives or how they have passed in their previous lives. Many of the people who are able to remember their past lives are children, many between the ages of 2 and 5. Different statements made by these children have shown to correspond accurately to facts in the life and death of a deceased person. Past life regression is a method that uses hypnosis on people to recover memories of their past lives or incarnations. The technique used during the regression involves the subject answering a series of questions while hypnotized to reveal identities and events of alleged past lives people have had. These experiments done are highly debated by scientists and religious leaders. Dr. Jim Tucker, who is now the director of the Division of Perceptual Studies, has been focused on cases of past lives found in the United States for the past 20 years. He has even written a book called Return to Life, which contains many of his findings throughout the years and offers accounts of a very strong American case of young children who remember their previous lives, including the two most well-known cases of James Leininger and Ryan Hammonds. James's story started just after his second birthday, where he began having nightmares that would not stop. In his nightmare, he would scream out phrases like "plane on fire," "little man can't get out." When James would mention details of planes and war tragedies, which no 2-year-old boy would know, his parents started to try and put the pieces together, soon realizing their son previously lived as a World War II fighter pilot by the name of James Hustings. There was a book written of this extraordinary boy and the previous life called Soul Survivor, which details the boy's thoughts, findings, and details of his previous life. Ryan's is one of the most famous of past life memories and holds the record for the greatest number of accurate memories of a previous life related to a previous living person. At around 4 years old, he soon began to relate memories to a man named Marty Martin, who worked in Hollywood as a talent agent. For years, Ryan would tell his parents about his previous life as Martin and many facts he would have no clue about at the age and would eventually be verified as true, including having a large swimming pool in his home, he tap danced on stage, he hated cats, he had a younger sister, his mother had curly brown hair, and so many more. These true cases just solidify that we are part of a parallel universe.
Number 3 on this list is Jofar Vorin. This is a man who ended up being shipwrecked in Germany, but originally came from a completely unknown land. BuzzFeed says, so this story goes, a peculiar guy popped up in a village where he was picked up and questioned by authorities. The only comprehensible language he spoke was a broken variation of German, but he said his name was Jofar Vorin and claimed to come from a part of the world known as Sakria. He conveyed that he was searching for his long-lost brother whom he'd been separated from during a shipwreck. While he had geographical information regarding his home planet, such as 5 compartments known as Sakria, Aflar, Aslar, Oslar, and Uplar, he couldn't trace his route on shore, and he would wind up living in Berlin, where he was a topic of discussion amongst the scientific and simply curious communities. This one seems like one of those stories where you get sucked into a whirlpool or something and then come out the other side in a totally different universe. I guess that's what happened here with Jofar. I must admit that I kind of feel bad for him if all this is true, because if all of this is true, then not only did you get sucked into another universe and are now forced to live here, but I don't think that you're ever gonna find your brother, bro. Stories like this should make you just a little bit more aware on that next fishing trip, I think. Number 2 on this list is the wrong turn. Imagine taking a wrong turn and ending up in an entirely different universe. That may have been what happened in this next story. BuzzFeed says the ladies had been driving on black asphalt in the desert, but after taking a wrong turn, they said they found themselves driving on white cement surrounded by grain field and a lake. They spotted a building with a large neon sign making up illegible random squiggles, and as they pulled in for assistance, a large group of tall men poured out of the front door, seeming shocked and upset, waving their arms at the girls. Then the girls realized these tall men didn't even appear to be human, so they freaked out and drove off. While the girls were driving away, they noticed 4 peculiar egg-shaped automobiles mounted on tricycle-style wheels, and they were following them. They sped ahead until the mysterious vehicles were out of sight, and when they reached the canyon and drove all the way back through it, they'd somehow returned to the desert they were originally in, glad to be back, but unable to figure out the mysterious place that they just gone or how they arrived there. So how the heck did that all happen? Also, they didn't mention it in the story, but what desert and what canyon is this in? This is seriously dangerous if all of this is true. I don't want to be driving through a canyon late at night and then just appear in another universe. Especially not a universe that has a bunch of super tall alien dudes chasing me around in eggmobiles. The girls who went there swear what they claim is true, so just be aware if you're driving out late at night. And number 1 on this list is the Band Breakuop. The Beatles, one of the greatest bands to ever create music, literally ever. They were incredible, and the thought of them making any more music together is just so intriguing. Apparently, in another universe, they did just that. BuzzFeed says in 2009, a man named James Richards was in Livermore, California, driving home from Turlock with his dog. He claims that when he pulled over to let the pup empty her bladder, she sprinted after a rabbit and he followed after her, but tripped, knocking himself unconscious. When James came to, he was next to an odd machine in the company of a man named Jonas, who claimed to have found his unconscious body while on a work trip for an interdimensional travel agency. While they were together, Jonas and Richards wound up chatting about the pop culture in their respective universes and discovered that not only did the Beatles also exist in this dimension, but they were all still alive and actively making music. Richards acquired a cassette tape labeled Everyday Chemistry, which contained Beatles songs that never existed in our dimension. He even uploaded the songs to a website and called it the BeatlesNeverBrokeUp.com. So if there is a universe where there are more Beatles albums, then sign me up, dude. This also opens the door to so many cool universes out there as well. Like, there's definitely a universe out there where the only thing that's different is like Dunkaroos never got discontinued. And you know, let's face it, that's the universe that I think we all should want to live in. Number 5 on this list is Greta Thunberg. Greta is a 19-year-old Swedish activist who is known for challenging world leaders to act faster and more appropriately to the ever-changing climate. She's been heralded by many as a young hero and has received many awards for just overall excellence in the short time that she's been alive. There may be a parallel universe out there though where Greta isn't living with us now. The Guardian says, could Greta Thunberg be a time traveler sent from the future to save humanity from the unfolding climate crisis? A bunch of Twitter users seem to think so after the photograph of a young Klondike gold miner bearing a striking resemblance to the Swedish activist was discovered this week. The now viral 1898 image of the 3 children operating a gold mine in Canada's Yukon Territory is part of a sprawling collection by the documentary photographer Eric Hegg. Near the end of the 19th century, the Swedish-American captured some of the most iconic images of people hoping to make their fortunes in the rugged north. One of the children looks eerily similar to the 16-year-old activist, famous for her Friday climate strikes in both the intensity of her stare and long braided hair. To those saying, how can she be in the past if she's from the future? Obviously, as a time traveler, she can travel to any time period. She obviously tried to go back 120 years, didn't work, and now she's here. Obviously, tweeted the writer Jack Strange. None of the children in the photograph are named, making it difficult to determine their identities. Only the date and location, Dominion Creek, are known. The image nonetheless captures the gritty reality many families faced as they searched frantically for gold. So the internet seems to think she's a time traveler, but I'm not as convinced. In my opinion, this photo could just as easily mean that there are parallel universes. Maybe in a parallel universe, Greta was actually born in the 1800s as a gold miner. Maybe that happened in one universe, but we're living in the universe where Greta actually was born as a Swedish activist. Comment down below what you think this means, cause it could mean a lot, guys. Number 4 on this list is the TV. So this next photo was posted to BuzzFeed a while ago and shows something super strange happening. A phenomena that just does not make any sense and leads me to think that something could be going down here. As we can see in this photo, we have a lovely kitty taking a snooze. It's lying on some white and blue bed sheets in a pretty small room. The room is mainly white and has a red fan on the floor, and the door is open, showing that there's another white room beyond it. Everything is normal up to this point, until you look at the TV. On the TV, in the actual room, there is very clearly a black man turning and looking past to the camera. He looks like he could be in a car or on a boat or something like that. Then we look into the mirror on the left side, and that isn't what we see at all. Instead of a black man looking back, it's a white kid looking forward. Now, what's really interesting about this is the subtitles in the middle of the screen. I actually can't make out what they say, but they're both yellow and look to be in the same font. Also, when we look from image to image, it seems like the boy could be having a conversation with the man, which then leads me to believe that this is actually the same movie or show, but it's playing at a different time. Now, how is that possible? Well, I will answer that for you. It isn't. Maybe though, there's a parallel universe out there where the exact same thing is playing out, but the person who's watching this movie in that universe is just a little further ahead or behind. And maybe somehow, what they were doing bled over into our universe. It's obviously a stretch, but we're in uncharted territory here.
Number 3. The San Fernando earthquake of 1971. On February 9th, 1971, the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains were struck by a sudden and unanticipated earthquake that was so powerful that it measured a 6.5 on the seismic magnitude scales. The earthquake lasted about 60 seconds, but the damage it caused was catastrophic. It resulted in millions of dollars of property damage, with multiple hospitals collapsing, multiple freeways being damaged by the shifting ground and by landslides. By the end of the earthquake, over 2,500 people were injured, and 64 people lost their lives. It is hard to imagine this massive earthquake being any worse, but if we are to believe the multiverse theory, where anything that could happen has, then there is a universe where this earthquake was the worst disaster in US history. The earthquake caused the nearby Van Norman Reservoir to suffer intense damage, with the top 30 feet of the dam disintegrating. If the reservoir hadn't only been half full, or half empty depending on your perspective, a massive flood would have been unleashed on the valley below. In our rather fortunate universe, the water stayed a mere 6 feet from the top of the damaged dam. The aftershocks of the earthquake did, however, cause the dam to continue to crumble, and as a result, the next 3 days were spent evacuating 80,000 people from the area as the dam remained standing thanks to only a few feet of freeboard. In a universe where the reservoir had been more full of water, or where this last 6 feet of dam had failed, the valley would have been flooded, and as a UCLA study later determined, a minimum of 71,600 and possibly up to 123,400 people would have perished in the resulting flood. That is more victims than Pearl Harbor, the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, 9/11, and the 1900 Galveston hurricane incidents combined. Number 2. A universe where the axis Axis won the Second World War. In war, the slightest miscalculation can spell defeat in a battle that can lead to an army losing an entire war. There were several decisions made by both the Allied and Axis forces during World War II that could have swayed the war in a different direction. For example, in 1940, a large segment of the British government wanted to make peace with the Germans rather than fight them. In 1941, Russia almost fell, and German troops made it within 40 miles of Moscow. The Germans made the mistake of turning on the Soviet Union in 1941, resulting in the Soviet Union becoming one of the most powerful armies in the Allied forces. Japan made the mistake of attacking Pearl Harbor, and thereby drawing the United States' massive army into the conflict. With so many spinning plates, it's not hard to imagine that there may be a universe where the Allies lost the Second World War. But what would that look like? Renowned historian Gerhard L. Weinberg looked at the hints from each country's heads of state about how they had envisioned a post-war world, and used these clues to construct a general vision of what this world would look like. Nordic countries such as Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the German-speaking regions of Switzerland would have been annexed by Germany. The government that they set up in Poland was set to inherit half of the Soviet Union, with the rest being promised to Japan. This would, however, be short-lived, as Germany planned to conquer Japan once they ceased to be useful in the conflict. Mussolini was promised the required lands to rebuild most of the Roman Empire, with the exception of France and Great Britain, which were to be left under German control. Due to the attitudes of the South Africans, it was anticipated that they would choose to support the German cause, and satellite governments were to be installed in Spain and Portugal. Details on how they planned on dealing with the United States are slim, but it seems they were being saved for last, with hopes of all the conquered countries being added to the German war machine, which should have been enough to conquer them through combined sheer force. Far more disturbing than the new geographical lines that would be drawn were the planned policies. Of course, the Germans planned on eliminating ethnic groups and people they deemed inferior in every conquered area. They also planned on eliminating Christianity and introducing a state policy of polygamy, so that German soldiers could more effectively rebuild the population that was being lost to the war. A universe where all this came to pass is terrifying, but considering how far behind Germany's nuclear program was in comparison to both the Soviet Union and the United States, it is just as likely that had the war continued on, it would have escalated to a nuclear threat. But in the infinite possibilities of the multiverse, either outcome is not only possible, but inevitable, thus creating multiple universes where the brutality and bloodshed continued on, resulting in the forces of evil being victorious and instilling their will on the world. Number 1. The branch reality created by Stanislav Petrov. The final entry on our list is a perfect example of how one decision made by one man can change the course of history and the lives of everyone on the planet in a matter of moments. It takes us to the height of the Cold War between the USSR and the United States in September of 1983. Soviet Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was the officer on duty monitoring the Soviet Union's missile attack early warning system. Tensions had recently escalated between the Soviets and the States, with President Ronald Reagan taking a much more hardline stance against the Soviets than his predecessors had, and increasing the United States' nuclear capabilities in both West Germany and Great Britain. On this particular day, a horrified Petrov watched as the early warning system began flashing the word launch in flashing bright red lights. The computer had determined with high reliability that 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles had been launched and were headed right for them. It was here that Petrov had a choice to make. If he reported this, the country's nuclear doctrine stated that they would immediately launch a counterattack against the states with nuclear arms of their own, with no time to double-check the system or negotiate with the American. If the computer was right, then missiles were headed right for him and his homeland. If the computer was wrong and they launched a needless attack on the states, they would be devastated by the blast and send a counterattack of their own. Fortunately for us, in our universe, Petrov chose not to report this incident and soon discovered that the missiles were actually sunlight reflecting off of a cloud and messing with the computer's sensors. However, in a universe where Petrov decided to follow protocol and report the incoming strike, the Soviet Union would have launched their missiles at the United States, resulting in between 35 and 77% of the country's population being destroyed, and 20 to 40% of the Soviet population being lost in the inevitable counterstrike. An additional 2 billion people would have likely starved due to the environmental devastation caused by the incident, making this one of the most important crossroads ever encountered in the history of the universe.